Agree to? I call the Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, I rise on behalf of the Labour Party to oppose this bill. Mr Speaker, Labour supported the bill to Select Committee to encourage thorough scrutiny of this sensitive issue. We are sorry to say that the concerns which we raised have not been met. Mr Speaker, nobody knows what cards life hands out to our families. Nothing has proved that to me more than a visit I did to a young family in Northall Road in New Lynn during my first election campaign in 1999. I met a young single mother with 3 primary school-age boys who had returned from a doctor's visit she could not afford to pay for. Her youngest son was calcium deficient. She could not afford to buy milk. She could not afford to buy milk for a calcium deficient son. Mr Speaker, she was on child support. The marriage had ended the year before, surprising to her and no doubt to those children. But the system that she faced was inadequate to meet the needs of her family or herself, and she was trying to study part-time as well as to bring up those 3 young boys. And when she told me her story on the driveway of that home in New Lynn, she wept. She wept. Every instinct as a parent told her that she was letting her family down when she had done nothing wrong. She was working her guts out for those kids, and the system had failed them, Mr Speaker. And this is our opportunity as a parliament to fix the system. God knows the National Party has been saying for a decade it needed fixing, and we agreed it needed an overhaul, and this was the chance. And the Minister for Incremental Change has served up a whole lot of tinkering, while 270,000 children grow up in our country in poverty, and 133,000 of those, like the 3 little boys in Northall Road, are the children of single-parent families, most of them dependent upon child support. And the system does not work. The Minister knows it doesn't work. He was so defensive in his second reading speech a few minutes ago that he opened by saying the government wasn't going to tackle child poverty. Shame, Mr Dunn, shame. Honourable Peter Dunn, this government stands in this House with high unemployment, a declining median wage, million-dollar pay packets for civil servants and state-owned enterprise bosses, while the value of their SOEs is trashed, widening gaps, the worst economic record in 50 years, and they aren't interested in taking this opportunity. There's the Minister for big noises. Why don't you make big change instead of tinkering with this bill, Mr Speaker? Mr Speaker, let us for a moment, in honour of Jerry Brownlee, just recount what we do agree on in this bill. What is the common ground? Firstly, it is this. It is impossible for legislation to take account of every specific family circumstance. It needs to be flexible, it needs to be responsible, and it needs to recognise that all families are different. Second, it is common ground that the child support system does need a major overhaul, including modernisation of the formula. But this new formula is neither transparent nor flexible, nor does it put more in the hands of the children that need it. So it's not doing the job. It's not fit for purpose, Mr Speaker. Third, we're agreed that the system should preserve the opportunity for parents to reach voluntary agreements. That's good. If they can, fantastic. But too many don't, and too many do, and then it's not honoured. But this government's done nothing about enforceability. These agreements are still voluntary and do not carry the weight of the law, and there's too many dads that get behind in the system and then go across the ditch to Australia to escape the consequences. Mr. Speaker, it's common ground that the penalty system was too strong, so that when dads got, and it is mainly dads, let's face it, when they get behind, they couldn't catch up, and they get locked out of the system, and then they run, and then they're separated physically and emotionally from their children who grow up fatherless. But this bill doesn't address that. It's a missed opportunity. And it's common ground that New Zealand's family law, above all, Mr. Speaker, has had a wonderful world-leading tradition of putting children first. But this bill doesn't. Indeed, I'm told that the national members of the Select Committee voted against consultation with their own minister about including in the bill a purpose clause that would have underlined the priority of the interests of the children. They wouldn't even discuss it, Mr. Brownlee, and you have the temerity to sit there, The member has the temerity, the Speaker has no temerity, the member has the temerity to sit there preaching to the opposition about the wonders of this bill. Mr. Speaker, finally, it's common ground that fiscal responsibility is important, but this bill costs the taxpayer $42 million more per annum than the old system, but puts nothing more in the hands of children. God, that's brilliant, isn't it, Mr. Brownlee? $42 million more out of the public purse, nothing more for kids. 270,000 growing up in poverty, 133,000 growing up in single-parent families, most of whom are dependent upon what we are discussing today, a population bigger than Dunedin, bigger than Hamilton, depending on this bill, Mr. Speaker, and Peter Dunn tinkers while their lives burn. Mr. Speaker, there's nothing new about this. Here's a quote from 2005. Writing off debt sends the worst possible message to absent liable parents, she thundered. Those who do the right thing and pay their way will be left wondering why they bothered, she screamed. The Honourable Judith Collins railing against the accumulation of unpaid child support debt. And when she did, Mr. Speaker, it was less than $1 billion. It was $1.3 billion when this government came to office. Guess how much it is today? $2.3 billion. They, sir, have presided over $1 billion blowout in child support debt, and they tinker with the system rather than overhauling it. The people of New Zealand are so sadly disappointed in this government. They did have hopes for it, and they are rapidly getting over that fallacy. They hoped that this would be a government with a heart, a government that would listen to families and whānau and communities and build on their good ideas from the bottom up, not tell them how to live their lives from the beehive down. Well, that was a sad, forlorn hope, wasn't it, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, the Labour Party believes that above all, this bill represents a lost opportunity to address the well-being of children and vulnerable families. The government has had years to address those issues and ensure the bill provided a fair way forward. The consultation process took them years, but the minister's just told us he's introducing amendments in this House that have never been to the Select Committee. A 2-year consultation, and he can't even get it to the committee on time. Mr. Speaker, despite all of that time, the government has failed to provide an improved system that is transparent, fair, flexible, that will address the situation of the 133,000 kids growing up in poverty in single-parent families, most of whom are dependent upon child support. Yes, we needed the penalties regime adjusted. Yes, we needed more flexibility. yes, we needed to put children first, but no, this bill does not deliver. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
What a wasted talent, Mr. Speaker. Point of order.
You have to call me.
Yeah, what I was just saying. What a wasted talent.
As a member calling.
A point of order.
A point of order. I call the Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr. Speaker, following a discussion at the Business Committee, I seek leave for the House to suspend for the dinner break following Charles Cheval's valedictory committee statement on the 27th of February 2013.
Is there any objection to that course of action being taken? There is none. It's agreed. I call the